You could just stay seated. If you want to just stay seated, because our music is going to be we'll stand for the invocation. But the one person who should be standing up is David Rogers, who's going to introduce our music. And there he is. Yeah. Stand if you want, Bob. Good job, David.
It's electronic music. So thank you, President John, fellow Rotarians. This coming week, we have two holiday celebrations coming. First, of course, Halloween on Sunday, and then on Monday and Tuesday, Dia de los Muertos, the Day of the Dead. Today's music recognizes the second of those. It's an important cultural tradition in our Latinx communities, a vibrant and festive celebration of remembrance, honoring both death and the beauty of life through food, flowers, and the creation of ofrendas, altars decorated with items honoring those who have passed. Two among many celebrations locally include Titan Arts and Humanities this coming Sunday from 11 to 3 at the Mighty Titan Warehouse, and then right here in Yakima, the annual Altar exhibition sponsored by the Yakima Morelia Sister City Association. That'll be right next to Ron's Coin and Books on 3rd Street, opening this Saturday noon and open every afternoon for the following week. So they're often conflated in public consciousness, but Dia de los Muertos differs from Halloween in the joyful nature of the celebration and the attitude that death is simply another part of life rather than something to be feared or dreaded. This song conveys that spirit, not only in the music, but in the lyric. If you'll pardon my abysmal Spanish. Yo no le temo a la muerte porque ella es parte mía. I am not afraid of death because she is part of me. Here is a song, Calvarita, by the band La Santa Cecilia.
Yo no le temo a la muerte, porque la muerte es parte mía. Nació conmigo y conmigo la muerte se irá algún día. Quiero invitar al tiempo para que me abran las puertas, me arrullen los recuerdos, esos que abrazan el alma y abren el sentimiento. Cuando toco ese pañuelo, las penas se despiden. Puedo abrazar a mi abuelo para que jamás se olvide que hasta las nubes no quiero, aunque en el cielo vive.
Calaverita, enciendes una velita, mi corazón.
I think maybe I should have had you stand, because then David could have led the dancing to that. So with our invocation, Priscilla Torino. And now you may stand.
Thank you, John. So today I wanted to share some parts of a book that I have partially read, to be quite honest. It's by Brene Brown, and it's Dare to Lead, and some of my takeaways and where I am in the book so far. So it's primarily focused on the heart of daring leadership. You can't get to courage without rumbling with vulnerability. Embrace the tough. At the heart of daring leadership is a deeply human truth that is rarely acknowledged, especially at work. Courage and fear are not mutually exclusive. Most of us feel brave and afraid at the exact same time. Having the courage to rumble. A rumble is a discussion, a conversation, or meeting defined by a commitment to lean into vulnerability, to stay curious and generous, to stick with the messy middle of the problem, identification and solving, to take a break and circle back when necessary, to be fearless in owning parts, and to listen with the same passion with which we want to be heard. Consider this carefully. Our ability to be daring leaders will never be greater than our capacity to be vulnerable. In our search for joy in our lives, we miss the memo. If we want to live a life of meaning, contribution, and belonging, we have to become intentional about cultivating sleep and play. True belonging is the spiritual practice of believing and belonging to yourself so deeply that you can share the most authentic self with the world and find sacredness in both being a part of something and standing alone in the wilderness. Daring leaders fight for the inclusion of all people, opinions, perspectives, because that is what makes all of us better and stronger. That means having the courage to acknowledge our own privilege and staying open to learning about our biases and blind spots. As daring leaders, we have to stay curious about our own blind spots and how to pull those issues into view. And we need to commit to helping the people we serve find their blind spots in ways that are safe and supportive. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Priscilla. Guests, if you have guests at your table, just kind of shout out. We'd like to welcome everyone today. And remember that membership applications are always available to guests. So welcome to everyone who's coming today. Right. And without further ado, if you did not have a brain dead president, this would have happened months ago. But I have a blue badge for
Lorna, can you tell Dwayne that John's microphone just went dead?
And I figured you were somewhat up the food chain from that. So there you are. Today, again, October 28th, read this book or read a book to anyone who will listen to you. So yes, Charlie, even you can read. So, and with that, now we will turn it over to Margaret Filkins on Yakaba Rotaract.
Thank you. Thank you, President Don, fellow Rotarians and guests. I have the honor this year of chairing the Rotaract and Interact Committee. And our first project will be helping them with the new member mixer that they have coming up. It's at Valley Brewing Company, which is on 32nd and River Road. It will be this coming Tuesday, November 2nd. 6:15, when people arrive, they're going to get a raffle ticket and a ticket for a beer, huzzah. And if the attendees sign up in advance, which is what they would like, you can go to Facebook, go to the Yakima Rotaract page, the events tab from there. And then if you register there, you get an additional drink ticket. So bonus. But have no fear, people can register at the door. Rotaract members will be there. The committee for Interact Rotaract here, as well as a couple people from Sunrise and Southwest to answer questions for potential members of the new and growing, it's not new, I guess, the growing back after COVID Yakima Rotaract. So let's see, I'm trying to think. Harkening back to my communications professor, we've got the who, all of you, inviting other people, what, new member mixer, when, next Tuesday at 6:15. So let's do why. And there's a video for that I thought was fantastic. This is why you want to support this event.
Hi, I'm Claire Richards. I'm the District 59.
It's really good.
Hi, I'm Claire Richards. I'm the District 5950 Rotaract Chair, and I'm also a member of the St. Cloud Rotaract Club. You joined Rotary for a reason. Maybe it's because you saw the impact it had in your community. Maybe it opened incredible business doors for you. Maybe you met some of your best friends. Whatever the case may be, you joined Rotary for a reason. Here is the truth of the matter. If we don't attract young people to be a part of the Rotary vision, Rotary will dwindle and die. Think about that for a second. Everything you've worked towards, all of the experiences you've had, could be gone for the next generation. So what do? Many of you have probably heard of Rotaract. Rotaract is a part of the Rotary family. It's geared towards emerging leaders ages 18 and older, and it offers many of the same things that Rotary does, right? These incredible opportunities to get involved in communities, to develop professional connections, to develop leadership skills. Rotaract is the answer to the Rotary pipeline issue.
So true. So that's why we want you to reach out. So here's your how. Reach out to young professionals in this community, businesses that you know who have younger professionals, people that you know, your children, your anybody else that you know, and give them this flyer. Invite them to attend this event. It's free to attend, and they want to really build up Rotaract in this community. So take the flyer home with you, put it up on bulletin boards. You can take the one off the desk, you can scan it. You can also contact me, Margaret at wellness-house.org, and I can give you an electronic. Let's get out there and support Rotaract because it really is the future of Rotary. Thank you.
Thank you. And there's beer involved and there is not me singing. So there's two other reasons for you to go. So, and with that, we'll now, all of you contributed so much to Operation Harvest. And so we have a lot to hear about in terms of the results and some exciting news as well to share. So we have Quinn Dolan and Pam Cleaver.
Thank you, President John. That's what being up here does to me. It makes me go in blank. Okay, so I have some numbers to share with for Operation Harvest. I have to say, when I agreed to be chair, I did not think that every meeting President John would say and then beat last year's record, which was very anxiety producing because I always aim for just not embarrassing. But before I go over all of the stats, I have to especially thank two people. One, Pete Bansmer which you guys, if he did not exist, neither would Operation Harvest. He does all the routes. He assigns all the routes. He tracks all the routes. He orchestrates fair day. He understands terms that forklift drivers need to know, and I don't know those. He orchestrates the drop site. And I have to tell you, this year at Fair Day, he was like, oh, I'm going to be on vacation on the Oregon coast, which good for Pete. He deserves a vacation. And we show up, I'm like trying to navigate the forklifts and the boxes, which he had all ahead of time. And then he shows up at like 4:30 when it was done. And Pete, I thought you were on vacation. Nope, he is there to spend 2 extra hours making sure all the 9 bins got forklifted and got out of places. So thank you, Pete. It would not happen without you. And then the second person that does all the work is Carolyn Flory, which we all know that anyway. And she's who literally typed up what I'm going to share with you today. So God bless Carolyn Flory. So we had 19 volunteers, worked 38 hours, gave out vouchers for fair tickets, and collected 9 bins of food on Rotary Operation Harvest Day at the fair. 150 Operation Harvest yard signs were updated with stickers for the new date, which was annoying, especially since Carolyn made us like rip all the stickers off so they could be pretty. 1 large banner was donated by Pepsi to display over Yakima Avenue. 19 volunteers held Operation Harvest signs on prominent street corners on Thursday and Friday before the big day. 1 Rotarian, Amy Mabe, who was supposed to be here with me and is getting a rescue dog, underwrote the cost of 15,000 bags. 21 volunteers stapled Operation Harvest flyers to every single one of the 15,000 bags. And then this is not even on here, but we probably literally dropped 14,000, maybe even 14,500 bags throughout Yakima, Sela, Moxie, Natchez, Union Gap. And by the way, that's brutal if you haven't done it.
You can look, there's a nice apple by your name. And there are different levels, and it's in the book, but there are different levels that you can contribute to, bronze, silver, gold, and platinum. And those are the levels. I know I'm trying to talk fast because so we're in our 7-minute period. So, but really when people say, what does Rotary Trust do? You know, what are we doing trying to make Yakima better? And yesterday, our invocation for Sunrise Rotary was by a fellow Rotarian who did a lot in Yakima. And I thought this kind of summed up what Rotary and Rotary Trust is all about. To be a Rotarian, to be young is to sit under trees you did not plant. To be a Rotarian is to plant trees under which you do not sit. To be young is to receive Christmas presents you do not buy. To be a Rotarian is to deliver Christmas presents you will not play with. To be young is to play in parks you did not build. To be a Rotarian is to build parks in which you will not play. To be young is to seek benefits from a city you did not build. To be a Rotarian is to build a city from which you will not benefit. And we as Rotarians are always trying to make Yakima better. So Yakima Trust is an awesome organization. I'm really privileged to be president for the next couple of years. If you have any questions, there are various Rotarians who have been on the trust, you know, past presidents and presidents always sit on the trust board. So please ask them. Kelly will be president after me, Connaughton. And we've got all kinds of people who can answer questions for you. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Pam and Quinn, and everyone who worked on Operation Harvest. And also, just to add to what Pam said, having been involved in the training for this august job and whatnot, and being more involved in the district recently, the trust is an incredibly wonderful thing that we here in Yakima, I think, should not take for granted, because most places do not have something like that. Some place that is a trust that actually works over all our clubs and can make larger things possible. So again, supporting the trust is really important because of what it gives to the community. So thank you all very much. Thank you everybody who's involved as well. And now with our Sergeant at Arms, I don't know, don't have a drum roll, but he wanted one, but it's Dave Hargreaves.
Thank you, President John, fellow Rotarians. Welcome so much. So as you know, Sergeant at Arms, the guests are excluded. And I think for this event also, we will exclude any healthcare workers or, James, fellow former healthcare workers, given all that they've already given. Excuse me. So it is challenging out there in healthcare. And I'm not going to go table to table, but according to the American Nursing Association, how many nurses do you think are expected to retire by 1920 or by 2022? 100,000, 250,000, 400,000, or 500,000? So we'll just use the Rotary four-way test. Lock in your answers. The answer is 500,000. 500,000 nurses retiring by 2022. It's fascinating because the interest in nursing is still there, and applications for enrollment are actually up over last year. But there were so many qualified applicants that were declined due to things like faculty, lack of faculty who have retired, classroom sites, clinical sites, and finances. So how many were turned away, you ask? How many qualified nursing students? Is it over 50,000, over 75,000, over 80,000, or over 100,000? Everybody got their answer locked in? It is over 80,000 were turned away. Actually 80,407. So obviously there's some work to do there. Earlier this month in Memorial Hospital, there were 242 patients admitted to Yakima Valley Memorial Hospital. Now, Memorial is licensed for how many beds? 176, 226, 276, or 310? You should know this. It is 226. So you can see that there was actually quite a few people more than there were for licensed bed. So if we go back to life expectancy in 1900, tell me what the life expectancy was in 1900. Was it 47, 52, 58, or 60? Got your answers locked in? The answer is 47. So all of you under the age of 47 pay $1 because the rest of us aren't supposed to be here. So in 1965, when Medicare was introduced, the pundits were predicting what would be the average life expectancy. Now, they concluded that the maximum life expectancy would be which age? 68, 70, 72, or 76? The answer is 70. So all of you over the age of 70 pay $1 because you really, they didn't know about you and you've kind of confused the whole Medicare funding. And I have to apologize because in our club, that's kind of considered a mass fine. In 1900, there were 122,000 people age 85 or older. In 1994, that number grew to 3.5 million people 85 or older. It's estimated that by 2050, there will be 19 million people 85 years or older, 5 million 100 years or older. Now, I want you to think about that. Can you imagine what it's going to be like driving in 2050? So If you've been frustrated, impatient, or honked at a senior in the last 90 days, pay $1. And here's to your good health. Moving on, it's Halloween coming up this weekend. How many people are going to dress up? Good. Well, the rest of you are kind of fuddy buddies, so you should probably pay $1. I'm not a big fan of Halloween. When I was really young, my mother dressed me in a very colorful piñata outfit, costume. And it sounded like a really good idea until I went out trick-or-treating and had the hell beat out of me. So if you have ever had your candy stolen on Halloween, or heaven forbid, stole someone's candy on Halloween, pay $1. Thanks so much, and good health and happy Halloween.
Thank you very much, Dave. It also sounds to me like it's going to be a bonanza for insurance people too. Now to introduce our speaker, President Linda Kaminsky.
Thank you. So I want to keep this introduction short so you have time to hear our speakers. So last December, I was invited to participate on a policy task force for the Latino Center for Health. And through that, I met the co-founders of that organization, Dr. Leo Morales and Dr. Gino Eisenberg of the University of Washington. And they are going to speak to you today about health issues and Latinos. Dr. Leo Morales is a professor and assistant dean for healthcare equity and quality in the UW School of Medicine. He received his MD and MPH degree from the University of Washington and his PhD degree from the Rand Graduate School in Policy Analysis. He is also a past recipient of a Robert Wood Johnson Minority Foundation Medical Facility Development Award and Health Policy Investigator Award, and was inducted into the American Society for Clinical Investigation in 2007. Dr. Gino Eisenberg is an associate professor at the University of Washington School of Social Work and is a bilingual, bicultural Latino mental health researcher. In 2013, he was named Associate Dean of the Graduate School, providing leadership in promoting diversity and community partnerships. He obtained his Master in Social Work and PhD degrees from the University of Southern California. Dr. Eisenberg is staunchly committed to address disparities in the access and utilization of behavioral health services by diverse populations. Please welcome Dr. Morales and Dr. Eisenberg.
Thank you, Dr. Kaminsky, and thank you to the Rotary Club for having us here today. It's great to get over to Yakima. We left a lot of rain and came to sunshine, so it was fantastic. And the colors of the fall, which are beautiful. So we're going to really talk about two different topics. I'm going to give you a very brief presentation about vaccination rates among Latinos, COVID-19 vaccination rates among Latinos that is based on a report we've just released. And then Dr. Eisenberg is going to talk a little bit about Latino physician shortage in the state of Washington. Is that too loud? Is that okay? Great. So you can go ahead and advance the slide. Yeah, one more. And I'm leaving this report here so that if any of you want access to it, you can have access to that. A little bit about our center. So the Latino Center for Health was established in 2014. We are a multidisciplinary community engaged research center with faculty and staff from the schools of medicine, social work, public health, and the information school. Our mission is to improve the health and well-being of Latinx communities in the state of Washington. And we receive support from the Washington State Legislature through proviso funding and project-related grants and contracts. Next slide. By way of background, we, I think, are all aware that Latinos have been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19, and that's reflected in higher rates of infection, elevated rates of hospitalization, higher mortality rates, and lagging vaccination rates. Next slide, please. You can go ahead and go. Thank you. So the purpose of this brief that I'm presenting to you today is to provide policymakers and stakeholders with the current vaccination rates among Latinos in Washington state to help inform policy and resource allocation in the state. Next slide. We use two data sources for our report. The first is the Department of Health COVID-19 dashboard with vaccination counts that's provided by race ethnicity, so we can identify counts by among Latinos. And the second is the denominator, which is the population estimates from the Washington State Office of Financial Management. These are the two sources of our data. Next slide. So our key findings. So as of September 29th, 54.6% of Latinos in the statewide have been successfully fully vaccinated, up from about 40% in July 1 of 2021. So there has been a 33% increase in the number of fully vaccinated Latinos in our state over this approximate 3-4 month period. That's a fantastic number to think about, a large increase, lots of effort. However, we need to be aware that there remain about 341,000 Latinos in our state of an estimated 752,000 who are at least 12 years of age and older. And these are individuals who are either still partially vaccinated or remain unvaccinated. Next slide. And you know, probably next week, we're going to have approval of COVID-19 vaccines for 5 to 11-year-olds. That will add an additional 157,000 Latinx children who will require full vaccination statewide. Our brief provides numbers at the county level as well. And what we can observe is that we have variation, a great deal of variation by county, ranging from a low of 19% of Latinos vaccinated to a high of 76% vaccinated, with a median county level of 43%. Next slide. So what we have here is every county in the state, and you can see the red and green parts of the pie. Green representing those who are fully vaccinated and red representing those who are either unvaccinated and partially vaccinated. And what you can observe is the variation that exists. As we look at central Washington, you know, extending from the Okanagan County down to Klickitat, you can see that, you know, there's some variation there with higher rates really being achieved in that Okanagan, Chelan, and Douglas County areas. Sort of intermediate in Kittitas, Yakima, and Benton, and then slower rates as you move east, both as you move east in the south and then as you move east in the north. So I know we're in Yakima County, so I want to let you know what the percentage is here. And we estimate that about 53% of Latinos in Yakima County have been fully vaccinated. So about 47% remaining to be either additionally vaccinated or vaccinated for the first time. And of course, we have the advent of boosters, which is going to require many more people to be vaccinated. The report is available to you I have left the PDF here. So if you want to review that, please do. And I'll be here to answer some questions, but now I'm going to turn it over. Go ahead. What's that? Oh, yeah. Thanks, Gino. So we have a project that we call Adios COVID, Goodbye COVID. And we've been working with a professor in the school, in the information school, to really create a tech-based response, trying to provide information bilingually and orient the communities towards where they can get vaccinated and provide information, answer questions. So recently, Adios COVID has been working with the Catholic bishops through a conference that's located in Seattle. And so we're initiating vaccination events actually here in Yakima as well as Othello. We're going to be in Wenatchee, Pasco, and in Spokane. So that's the kind of efforts we're trying to make. It's really bringing together vaccinators who are paid for by the state and community organizations that can reach those hard to reach Latinos who are disconnected from the healthcare system and still may have questions about whether or not they want to be vaccinated. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Leo. It's a great pleasure to be here with you this afternoon. Mindful of your time commitment, so I'll go through the information as quickly as possible. If you can advance the slide, that'd be great. Our healthcare system is failing Latinos. COVID-19 illustrates how our state is failing to meet the health-related needs of Latinx individuals in our state. 28% of cases compared with 13% or 13.5% of the population. 3.3% of Latinos are at greater risk of dying. We may ask ourselves, well, why? One reason, not the sole reason, but one reason is the limited access to a culturally and linguistically responsive healthcare workforce, the scarcity of bilingual, bicultural physicians. And so the center took on an examination of the prevalence of physicians in Washington state, supported by proviso funding from the state. It's clear that a diverse physician and health care workforce is necessary for health equity. And linguistic and cultural concordance results in better health care. Please advance. Physicians from diverse communities are much more likely to practice in underserved, diverse communities. Next slide. Our data sources for this study was the Washington Medical Commission Physician Survey. It was administered in the months of April 2017 to March 2019. Over 20,000 respondents participated. Next slide. What we found was that Latino physicians only constitute 3% of the workforce of physicians in the state. If you look at physician to population ratios, white physicians to the population, they're 277 per 100,000. For Latino physicians, that ratio is diminished to 45 per 100,000 in the population. Next slide. Only 11% of current practicing Latino MDs were educated in our medical schools in our state, Wazoo, Pacific Northwest, and UW. There's room to grow. Next slide. 39% of Latino physicians serve lower income patient populations. Next slide. Many Latino communities are underserved by Latino physicians, including in many counties severely impacted by COVID. We know that with the onset of the pandemic, the Yakima Valley was a hotspot with over 44% of cases of COVID being identified just in the county. If you can see the shades, it is below federal standards. When you look at Chelan and Kittitas and Yakima and Grant counties, the shortage of physicians. Next slide. Leo could explain this better, but to reach population parity, we would need to add 1,885 Latino physicians tomorrow just to gain a sense of equivalency. Next slide. Our state's medical schools are not training enough Latino physicians. It's clear. The total number of Latino medical students enrolled in the state's medical schools in the academic year of 2019-2020 was 143, constituting but 7.3% of the state's 1,958 medical students. At this rate of enrollment, the representation of Latino physicians will not increase, it will decline. Over time, due to the projected growth of the Latinx population in Washington. We know that nationally, there's stiff competition for graduating Latino physicians, and that competition is going to increase while the population also grows. We also recognize that IMGs, foreign medical graduates, remain a small and underutilized source of Latino physicians, not only in Washington, but in Washington state. When we engaged in the work of this report, we didn't want it to be like a Bible collecting dust. So we said we need to engage in policy efforts to inform elected officials and other key stakeholders. Next slide. So under the leadership of Senator Emily Randall, a bill, Senate Bill 5228 was established and implemented. It is to increase admissions of UW Latino applicants to medical schools in the state. The goal was to increase the number of Latino students admitted to medical school, to begin this process of addressing the shortage and to achieve population parity. Wazoo, and we were focused on the public medical schools in the state. And so both schools, Wazoo and UW, set a goal to reach population parity in the year 2025, at which time approximately 14.5% of the state's population will be Latino. Each year, the schools will report via their website their progress, and we stand in collaboration with them to be successful in this achieving of this goal. Next slide, please. And next slide. The other policy recommendation stemming from the report was House Bill 1129. And it too was passed by the state legislature and signed by the governor during the past legislative session. Its goal was to diversify graduate medical education programs, to increase the number of practicing Latino underrepresented physicians with linguistic and cultural backgrounds congruent with Latino communities. IMGs are international medical graduates. They were licensed physicians in their home countries, whether in Peru, Guatemala, Brazil. But coming to the US, they cannot practice as licensed physicians. So this policy created a pathway for the IMGs to enter Washington residency programs, prioritizing the IMG candidates that meet the linguistic and cultural needs of Latino and other underserved communities in the state. Next slide. Other policy, next slide, sorry. Other policy recommendations include strengthening the pre-medical education ecosystem, expanding loan repayment and stipend programs. One thing that we were pleased to be successful in, WISMA, the state's statewide organization for physicians, never had a caucus, a representative body of Latino physicians until it's last year, correct? Or this year, where they created the caucus that continues to grow and be impactful. We want to expand Latino and underrepresented minority health professions research and policy infrastructure, not just for physicians, but for social work, nursing, public health, and pharmacy in the health professions. Next slide, please. The center has been active, as you can probably surmise, in terms of responding to the pandemic. We also completed a study earlier this year in partnership with CMAR Community Health Centers. We have submitted and published 3 policy briefs. We held a recent symposium last week focusing on the impacts of COVID across the state, impacting Latino populations. as Leo mentioned, about the Adios COVID and pop-up clinics. And also for the past 20 years that I have lived in Washington State, I've partnered with the Yakima Valley Farmworkers Clinic. And about a decade ago, they asked me to help them address depression care, because 50% of their patients were not following treatment protocols for depression. We introduced with some colleagues and resources, telephone-based depression care. It's manualized, 8 sessions, about 35, 40 minutes each session. Highly successful. It was funded by the National Institute of Mental Health. So successful, they said we didn't have to do a larger clinical trial, which wasn't the news that we wanted to hear, but what has subsequently evolved is that in partnership with the Farmworkers Clinic, but also now Heritage University, the scarcity of master level clinicians to deliver this, we experienced in the original study. So for the last 3 years in this recent partnership, we have trained bachelor students in their senior year at Heritage University to deliver the same manualized, evidence-based cognitive behavioral intervention to patients of the Yakima Valley Farmworkers Clinic. I certainly was skeptical that you could train them. Would they have the requisite abilities and skills? The past 3 years, we've demonstrated evidence that they have been remarkably effective. And it fills a gap, not only for the Farmworkers Clinic and their network, but for the broader community in terms of access. So we can. Next slide, please. One thing that the pandemic has been beneficial for is that it forced the state to provide temporary waivers for telemental health services. One of the limitations of the intervention that I just described is that telemental health services were not reimbursable. So they couldn't be integrated in the system of care. The pandemic has forced the state to provide temporary waivers. We're going to be engaged in this legislative session to make permanent the waivers, because we know that telemental health services are impactful and are beneficial. We want to increase access to evidence-based, culturally responsive telephone CBT, depression care, to provide support for making effective use of promotoras, community members who are very trusted. They've been very instrumental already in terms of helping people seek vaccination and mental health services, providing information in Spanish and trusted sources of information to the community. The survey study also recommended in the short term that the state provide up-to-date information regarding mental health services and health services in Spanish. There's a lot of misinformation and misunderstanding. And so it's critical that the information be accessible in Spanish. Next slide. In terms of some long-term recommendations, we want to promote a workforce in Washington State by expanding, increasing the pipeline of practitioners graduating from schools of public health, nursing, social work, psychiatry, psychology, and medicine. Toward this end, to find means of funding, training, and supervision of such seniors at Heritage University and other institutions within our state to provide quality evidence-based care. And also long-term recommendation is to incentivize college and university educational programs across the state to strengthen and enhance their equity curriculum. We want to make ready students at community colleges such as Yakima Valley College so that they be competitive candidates ready to take their place at universities and contribute to the excellence and health within our state. Next slide. So muchísimas gracias. Thank you. And on behalf of Dr. Morales and I, we appreciate your time and we're happy to answer any questions. These slides, as well as the policy brief, are accessible. And if you wanted to learn more about the physician study, it's accessible on our website. You just need to type Google Latino Center for Health, and it'll take you to our website. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Or I know they'll be here after the meeting if you'd like to speak with them. Jim?
Is great. What part, I look at the education system as a whole, and I'm thinking to myself, what you're doing could be also done in the education system in Washington State, because when you look at the number of teachers, Latino teachers in Washington State versus the population, the same things hold true in the lower level of education. So how do you think that's affecting what's going on at the higher level of education?
Well, thank you for that question. And we weren't able to present the full scope of what the work we did around the physician pipeline, but it's K through 12 and even before K. And all along the way, we see that, there's lack of progression and in many ways, inequities in the education systems that students have access to. And in fact, we looked at broadband coverage as being a factor, particularly here in Eastern Washington, Central Washington, as being related to during the pandemic, whether or not students have access to quality education. And we, of course, see those disparities as well. So I think it's all related. This is not a problem that begins with application to medical school. It's a problem that begins in the neighborhoods, in the elementary schools and in high schools, in all our communities.
Thank you for your question. We chose to focus on more immediate, but we have, as part of our recommendations, the K-12 areas to emphasize across professions and disciplines. But I want to share a brief story. Maybe it was about 12 years ago that a student in our master's program of social work said, Gino, you're the first Latino instructor I've had in my life. She is now having completed her dissertation. She graduated with her PhD as a professor at Portland State University and is going up for tenure. What we can represent as role models and as mentors from young to old, but it's a tragic reality when people can't see themselves in educators and instructors. So there's need to improve in that as well. So thank you.
We have time for maybe just one more question. So it's whomever. Dwayne, do you want to go ahead or?
Yeah, I'm ready. So the Farm Workers Clinic's been a 40-year, maybe 50-year project going on since 74 or something like that. Provides a lot of the primary care in the lower valley. So what's the distribution of Latino physicians or foreign medical graduates or international medical graduates in the farm workers cadre of physicians? That's one. And secondly, if a physician is bilingual but not culturally Latino, is that improve the perception of the relationship with the patient, or does it not?
If you saw Gino Eisenberg, you would never think of me as Latino, and I have no Italian blood. Pero soy Latino, Mexicano. Carlos Olivares, the CEO of Farmworkers Clinic, would have that data. We wouldn't, but we're actually meeting with him next Wednesday, I think. We have a meeting with him. So we'll ask Carlos. We'll ask him so we can find that, because I know they're still desperately looking for physicians and providers who are able to engage their population across the spectrum, behavioral health and others. In terms of if you're If you're bilingual, does that help? Yes. If you're an effective listener, that goes a long way to communicating with different populations and across differences. To someone who has invested to learn a different language, such as Spanish in this case for the Farmworkers Clinic, you would think that they're invested in terms of wanting to engage the population. And at least my experience, because I didn't grow up speaking Spanish, if you make the effort, it is greatly appreciated, greatly valued in terms of from the community standpoint. So yes, it makes a difference. It makes a difference to build trust, and it makes a difference if you are wanting to speak to informed consent. You can't do that in English. It has to be in the language of the patient. And so being able to communicate that effectively is a great plus. Thank you.
I know, Amanda, we kind of give a short. Yeah. Thank you. And thank you very much. And in your name, we're presenting a book to one of the one of the community centers here. We're doing it this year on various issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion. This one is a crackling page turner, it says, but it's about a boy who has some facial disfigurement and goes to a new school and how he maneuvers that. And so it's a thing. So that's will be in your honor. Thank you. Thank you both. Now, you also know that I sometimes have known to read weird stuff. And this morning I happened to be reading an issue of the Centennial Record News, which came out during the year of 1876. I did not read it firsthand. This is actually reading it later, but that was the year of the Great Centennial Exposition in Philadelphia. It's one of the great world fairs, national fairs, but they have a little column in there, and I thought there were two things that were actually right next to each other in one of the issues that kind of spoke a little bit to today. Not really, but it's close. During a recent smallpox panic in New England, a small boy was brought to the city by his mother for the purpose of receiving a vaccination. Imagine that. The first time the boy was allowed to attend Sunday school after returning home, the lesson chanced to be about going to Jerusalem to celebrate Passover. Can anyone tell me? Asked the teacher, why all the town went up to the city. The little boy, remembering his recent journey, instantly replied, why, to be vaccinated, of course. So there's right with it. But right next to it was this one, which I thought, I don't know why they put these two together because it's not really very appropriate, but it's a tombstone epitaph. Under this sod, our baby lies. He neither cries nor hollers. He lived just 27 days and cost us $40. Very sentimental. So, and with that, we are adjourned.